Well, welcome back to Exceptionally Average. I am Craig.
I'm Steve.
It is good to be back with you, Steve. Steve, how you doing?
I'm doing terrific. And oddly enough, it feels like we just talked.
I know, right? We're trying to stack up some of these recordings for our listeners' pleasure.
That's right. We're serving people right now.
We
right?
talk a lot about being efficient in our time.
Yes.
And one of the ways we've learned to be efficient in our time is to record some of these back to back to back, do a slow release so that they're out there, but that we're not coming over here every single week because that does not make sense for either of our schedules.
Right, and they'll wonder why we're wearing the same clothes.
I didn't even think we should have done a set change. This is the kind of quality, but with the main form being audio, they won't know that. So
This is why we are exceptionally average.
Yeah. On a high quality podcast, you might get a change of shirt. Not here.
Not here, no.
Today, I'm excited about our topic, talking about kind of men moving from friendship to brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And we're going to flesh out a lot of what that means and even kind of verbally process with our listeners. Mm-hmm. But the general idea we want guys to see is that we need brothers in our life that can carry a deep bond with us. And it might only be one or two or three. It's probably not going to be many.
That's right.
But in a day and age where maybe we have a lot of friends, Facebook friends or whatever, or I've got my golfing buddies and I've got 15 of them, but none of them know you. None of them are your brother. Could you call them at 3 a.m. when your life is breaking down? Mm-hmm. Who do you go to with the weight of your soul? That's what we want to talk about today, is specifically why men need it.
That's exactly right. And it's so important for us to be able to connect. I think of that connectedness. You know, we all have friendships that maybe we see a friend every 6 months or every 6 years. Who knows what that time circulation looks like. But when we see that individual, it's surface conversation. It's, hey, how's the family doing? Oh, good, great. Mm-hmm. Hey, how's your wife and kids? Oh, they're good. How's your mom doing? I remember your mom. She's doing great. And it doesn't take that deep dive to allow men to become connected with one another, that brotherhood that we so deeply yearn for. And I truly believe that that's the right terminology when we say we yearn for it. I believe too, and this is kind of the conversation that we had prior to opening this program up, is that friends are just that. They're friends. For us as men, we don't require a whole lot of friendships or actually even want that many friendships as much as maybe our spouse would like to have all these friends. For us, friendship just on the surface is transactional. In other words, it's just an exchange of information sometimes, or of time.
Buddy to play golf with, or go shooting with.
Time. And so that exchange, that transaction is very generic at times. And so that's why I think, well, I don't know that I require many friends. It's not that I don't require them. It's just that that's not what I'm seeking. I'm not seeking friendships as much as I'm seeking brotherhood with a chosen few, the people that I can rely on, and they can rely on me. And so I think that there's a real difference when we make that jump, when someone becomes more of a friend to a brother in Christ. And I think that there's value in that. What do you say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's and maybe this will be a good way to kind of start it. What do you think, are some of the key differences between a friend relationship and a brother? We've talked about some of the friends. It's more transactional. And again, nothing wrong with friendships. Right. We're not saying that.
Right.
Like, to have the buddies that you can watch the Buckeyes game with or the Wolverines game with, great. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. We all need neighbors. We all need the buddy that we see and we wave to and we talk, once every 6 months we play golf with, because they like golf, we like golf, and we get to golf together and we enjoy. But the substance is superficial.
Yeah.
When you think of brotherhood, what are some of the characteristics or kind of that male bonding experience? What are some of those characteristics that you think of that really make a true brother? If you're looking for that kind of relationship, what do you want to see in that guy or in that relationship?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. I want to see somebody who genuinely wants to see me become the best version of myself. Not somebody who's going to encourage me to drink another beer and then drive home. Not somebody who's going to encourage
and doesn't care if you do.
Doesn't care if I do or I don't. Somebody who recognizes that, hey, Sunday is for your family. Why don't you stay home with your family? Let's not go play golf today. I think let's spend time with our families. Or that's someone who might call you up or you meet and you say, hey, how's things going? And they say, I'm not doing really well. Can we talk for a minute?
Can be honest with.
Yeah. And you have that genuine brother to brother, and it doesn't need to be by blood.
Yeah. It almost always isn't, right?
Right. That brother to brother relationship that you feel that bond, that closeness to, that you can open up to somebody. And that's something that is, strangely enough, maybe wives or women in general don't recognize this about men, but we are very intuitive and in touch with our feelings. Maybe it's just not outwardly so, but we recognize those who want to purposefully be a part of our lives and invest in us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when I think of brother, I think a man who is running the same race at the same pace. We might not be at the same place. That's all rhyming way too much. But what I mean by this is you're further along in your race. Mm-hmm. You're 15 years older than me. Your kids are grown. But we are running the same race, and we are running it at the same pace.
Right. I'm a lap ahead.
Yeah, but I'm grinding to try and be the best father and husband I could be, just like 15 years ago, Steve Harris was trying to be the best father and husband he could be because he's got young kids in the home, trying to provide a financial living, wife staying home, same situation. So we are running the same. So when I come to you in brotherhood, I can expect good wisdom from you because you've run the same race and you're doing it at the same pace with the same values. When I say pace, I'm thinking of focus on Christ, grinding each and every day, going to bed tired because you value your time. So you're going to wring it out on the court type deal. If you have a friend, and we all do, who's been fired 17 times, smokes pot on the weekends, like you said, is drunk. They're hilarious. You love being around them. They're funny. But if you looked at them and said, I have a problem in their marriage, and they're like, don't look at me, I've been divorced 3 times, whatever.
Right.
That, like, they're not running the same race, and they're sure as hell not running the same pace.
That's the locker room talk.
Exactly. And so, like, we have friends like that, but those aren't the guys that you need in your corner when suddenly, if I can beat the race analogy to death, your pace is falling off and you're starting to go like, what's going on here? Right. I've got the check engine light coming on. And so when I think about brotherhood, I really value men who, for me personally, this is what I value, taking Christ seriously in their own life. And again, that's not weird about their faith, but that Christ is a essential part of who they are, is their number one focus, and impacts all areas of their life. So when they think about sex with their wife, it's under the dominion of Jesus Christ. When they think about their money, it's under the dominion of Jesus Christ. When they think about their fanhood of local sports teams, it's under the dominion of Jesus and doesn't become this idol or this thing. When they think about hobbies, so they've got to be following along with Christ. That is my number one thing, because we're probably not going to be brothers if we can't connect in that. Now, there's plenty of guys who are less mature in their faith that I can almost look at as a younger brother, maybe coming along, but they're trying to run the same race as me and stuff like that. So that's what I really look at. I would really think one of the reasons men struggle with this is they haven't surrounded themselves with guys that are of quality to actually connect with.
I would make the statement that they have surrounded themselves with guys. They haven't surrounded themselves with men.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they look around and they're like, you want me to tell these clowns what's going on in my life? Like, they're going to make fun of me. They're going to, rag on me, and they're not going to take anything seriously. It's like, well, that's not good.
Right.
Let's dig into that though, because I think and I'll share a little later. I have a brother in my life that I can share exactly what this means for guys and why I think it's important, and not biological. Why do you think men struggle so much having these brotherhoods? What are some of the reasons why? Maybe even Steve has struggled with it. Why have you struggled with to have deep brotherhood type relationships? But then also, what do you see in men?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding yourself and learning who you are as an individual. Because if you don't know who you are, you don't connect. You don't know who to go seek that is like you. So, men are systematic. At least I think in our approach, I am. I'll speak for me in particular. I think I can
most men are.
Rely on you
not
to be
100%, but most men are.
Right.
Yeah.
And by systematic, I mean we like processes.
We're a waffle. We're not a plate of spaghetti.
Yeah, we like things that are kind of linear and that we can rely on. And so when we seek people like us. So we have to start with really defining who we are as individuals, whether it's
and guys struggle with that.
Yeah.
So
who am I as a follower of Christ? Who am I as a husband? Who am I as a father? As a coworker? And we wear all these different hats throughout the entirety of one single day. And so to put this together and figure that out systematically can be very challenging for us. And if we don't figure that out, then it's very difficult for us to go out and find that like individual that we feel can support us. Now, a lot of times what will happen, and this happened for me, is at a young age of 18 or 19, I'll use my stepbrother as an example. I really looked up to him, but I couldn't tell you why. I just liked what he had. And it wasn't things. It was this comfort of being comfortable in his own skin. Mm-hmm. And I admired that so much. And so he kind of sat on my emotional board of directors, so to say. And so I wanted to emulate that. And so as I started to accumulate more individuals on my board of directors, whether they knew it or not, right? I began to define who Steve Harris was, what he wanted in life, who he expected to be as a follower in Christ, as a husband, and as a father. And so that became very clear to me and continues to become more clear to me as my life continues. But eventually, you take those small risks or those small steps and you track the success of that. Like, oh, I just followed him and boy, that made me better. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'm better than I was a year ago. I'm going to take another small step. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go talk to him and just ask him a couple questions or so. All of a sudden, this becomes part of that experience, that learning curve that we begin to see that it's okay to invest in people. Now, we as men are very careful about that. Yeah. So I think we are less likely to jump into those situations as opposed to our gender counterpart.
And I think that actually might be part of the problem is some of these guys, because we don't make new friends, we made our friends in 6th grade or in college, and then it's like, well, those are my friends. And then none of them have that brotherhood quality. It's like, well, I don't have one then.
Right.
Because we won't make any other ones because we don't. It is a slower roll and it is harder as a grown man. And, where am I going to make them? Soccer practice, whatever, that kind of thing. I definitely think that's a hurdle.
Some of the things that I think as I transition in my role, now don't misunderstand me, I still have mentors that I value and I love and I look at as brothers and mentors. But I think there's also a transition or a shift for me that I recognize I have the responsibility. What is given is expected to be given in return. Mm-hmm. And I have that responsibility to nurture and help others along behind me that are younger than me, that are formally in my path that I used to be in. And so I look at them and I think, what did I want when I was their age? Well, what I wanted was somebody ask me a very deep and personal question that it gave me the chance to talk about myself in a way that maybe I could allow myself to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And I often take that chance with some of my younger friends.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, where are you at with this? Hey, you mind sharing this? Is this something you're ready to talk about? And you would be surprised, as a mentor, the number of young men who are yearning for those questions to be asked, because no one else will come alongside of them shoulder to shoulder and ask them that, because everything is just on the surface.
And that's actually one of the biggest issues, I think, with what keeps men from having these brotherhoods is a lack of vulnerability amongst men. Vulnerability is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say something. I think, the 5 people that listen to this will understand my heart behind it. I don't mean it to be rude, but growing up for you and for me, and I don't think it's this way anymore. That's good, because we've become a little bit more politically correct. For a man to show emotion was considered homosexual.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that. If you went to your friend and said, hey, man, can I just talk to you? I really got my feelings hurt yesterday. And they would say, you are gay.
Right.
That was a thing that a straight man
exactly
did not do. Now, of course, we know that is absurd. We know it's homophobic. We know it's wrong. We know all of those things. And hopefully in 2022, we wouldn't do that. But it's built into us to not share, to not bring out some of these things, to not actually be open and honest with our and vulnerable. You can go back and listen to our conversation about emotional health and how men struggle with this vulnerability. But you can't have a brother if you're not willing to be vulnerable, because what will it stay? It will stay a friendship. Right. And so it takes, like you said, that one person to ask the intentional questions, to say, hey, talk to me about that. Or like you said earlier, that actually is willing to call you on your crap. That's willing to say, hey, that's not good. I had a friend who committed adultery, and he had other friends in his life. I had a brother who committed adultery, I'll say. And I was like, yeah, you blew up your life, dude. What are you thinking? This isn't appropriate. You said you believe A, you're acting out B, and I'm going to call you on that. I love you. I'm not going anywhere, but like, what are you doing? And he had other friends like, yeah, well, man, hey.
It happens.
It happens. Guys love sex. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And so like that thing where like we have that ability to be vulnerable and be like, I'm hurt by the fact that you did that. Like, I'm your friend. Like, you were living a double life with me, like in this stuff. And it's like, that's brotherhood, but that takes a tremendous amount of vulnerability to get there. And a lot of guys just won't do that. I think another big thing is time. It takes a lot of time. As you said, we don't come to these relationships quickly. And so because of that, we just won't invest the time to get to know someone, to spend time together, to have that lunch, to grow, to ask those questions consistently over time. And so because of that, man, it can lead us into the woods.
Yeah, we don't know how. I don't know how you were growing up, but I know with my father, and I love my father very much, don't misunderstand me, and I know he loves me very much. But I also will tell you that when I cried, it was stop crying or I will what?
Give you something to cry about.
Give you something to cry about.
Yeah.
So you're hardwired very quickly.
Shove it.
That you shove it, you bury it deep down inside.
I would say it can explode inappropriately at Thanksgiving or kick the dog.
Yes, exactly.
That was the two.
You're allowed to explode at Thanksgiving and tip the table over. That is perfectly acceptable.
Or cuss at the dog.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But we're taught to bury those feelings immediately. And so anything outside of that is considered wrong,
not
maybe
manly.
A little bit dirty,
not
manly. And we get this skewed definition of what it means to have this friendship. So when we meet people or we think we bond with individuals, other men, it's all surface conversation. It's how you doing? It's hey, how's the family, as we mentioned before. And we laugh and we tell jokes, right? But we never get to the thing. And it might be something that I know Craig is struggling with, but because I only have a surface friendship, I intentionally avoid the conversation because I'm afraid of upsetting Craig, I'm afraid of being awkward.
Yeah, think about and we've talked a lot about this because of the way you've helped me in my physical health journey. we know other people that struggle with their physical health.
Sure.
And you've asked me, like, how can I talk with other guys about this without feeling incredibly rude? Like, so it doesn't just sound to them, hey, fatty, like, let me help you. Like, of course, you'd never say, but like, it could be perceived as that. But that's, again, that friendship level of like, and I've kind of said, you can't really, because you don't have that. We know guys that you're like, in your professional career, I guarantee you know someone that probably has an alcohol problem, that drinks too much, and you can see that. You don't have the relationship to get into. That's a deep level thing. And so you're just like, not touching that kind of thing. And so, again, that friendship versus brotherhood of where like, we keep everything on the surface, we keep everything moving, we make the joke, we life of the party, but then we're left alone in the midst of that. And then we don't have someone to unload or unburden to. How have you found, or do you have an example where you've taken that first step of vulnerability? Because it's maybe easier to ask the question, but how have you in your past shared and been vulnerable with other guys? Do you have any moments that come to mind, or any thoughts of like, yeah, I've just ripped the Band-Aid off and said, well, fine, I'll put my junk, so to speak, out there. Because that can, for other guys, go, oh, okay, like, we're doing this.
Yeah, this is such a great question. And I'll tell you, this is going to sound a little bit like a commercial, and I don't intend it to be that. But this is the power of the church.
Yeah.
And when we think that we don't need to be connected or part of the church inside the four walls on Sunday and part of it on Wednesday night, or whenever there's events that we connect with people, we're making an incredibly bad mistake. Because it was that connectedness, and I go back to that word, that gave me the muster, if you will, to go forward and ask one of the elders in a previous church. And as a result, this gentleman and his wife became tremendous friends and still are to this day, and they are confidants and mentors to us, and we love them dearly as brothers and sisters in Christ. But I will say that it was through observation that I watched this gentleman and his wife and how they interacted with others and how they carried themselves from a distance. I hadn't said much to them other than hello, but there's that intuitiveness that we pick up on, whether any human being, you don't have to be male or female to do it, but there was something instinctive in me that said, that is a man of God. Mm-hmm. And I'm watching him, and I watched him for a long time. So when we think that people aren't watching, when we think that we're not influencing others because we don't talk to them, you're dead wrong. We are.
For good or bad.
Exactly. So there are people watching you all the time. You are an example to someone, good or bad. And he was a good example for me. So when there was a time when Jill and I were struggling with something that would seem trivial, and seems trivial now, but at the time it was the biggest thing in the world. Yeah. We called him, or I called him and said, look, I know maybe you don't know me that well, but I've been watching you in the church, and I can tell that you are truly a man of God, and I need some help. Are you that person? And boy, it was just like instant connection, and these neurons with both of us just started firing and triggering, and we connected so much and so quickly, and he began to ask questions that made me think, and
that no one else was asking.
That no one else was asking me, even though my closest friends knew something was not right with me.
Yeah.
I had to seek that individual. So that's the power of the church. And as a mentor and someone, it's great to be willing to mentor, but you also have to be willing to be mentored. And you make yourself, back to that word, vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And so there has to be that symbiotic relationship, so to say. And it doesn't need to be an older person to a younger person. No. You can recognize that, hey, I've got somebody my age or maybe even younger that could really help me out with someone. And I see that they're a man of God, and I know instinctively that I can trust them.
Yeah, my brother in this life is a guy named Matt. And the unique thing about Matt is we have not lived in the same town since 2010.
Okay.
But for every single week, call it 47 weeks a year, 45 weeks a year,
Right.
genuinely 45 weeks a year, probably. For 12 years now, we have Skyped over our lunch break 1 day a week and just built a friendship.
Yeah.
Or built a brotherhood, I should say.
Understand.
And it started with exactly that. You take Jesus really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I take Jesus seriously. We're both newly married. We didn't have kids when it started. Now he's got 4. I've got 2. I had just started as an intern. He was a marketing and graphics guy. So he's in the rat race of secular work. I'm in the rat race in the church, and just trying to figure out how to love our wives. We both we were raised in the church, but weren't Christian kids. If that makes sense. And we have, over these 12 years, he's my closest friend other than my wife. But there are things I can say to Matt that I haven't said to my wife. And that's not in an inappropriate way. There's things that I've been able to confess and share, and that he carries that burden. And here's the thing I love about Matt. He's just as likely to put his arm around me as he is to put a spur in my side and move me along. Most of the time, it's both. When I come to him and share and confess, hey, I did this thing. I get the gospel, that God loves you, he forgives you, you can repent, but also, what were you thinking? How did you get to this point? Why would you think that was okay there?
What were the triggers?
What
Things
were the
like
triggers?
that.
And then vice versa.
Yeah.
It wasn't that I was the messed up one and he was the perfect one. It was a two-way relationship, and that's probably what you was disarming even in your relationship, is suddenly it's like they were listening to you. Like, there's not this Yoda and Luke kind of thing. There's a brotherhood. There's clearly wisdom coming one way, but there's times where it's like, man, this is a symbiotic relationship. But so when guys are like, well, I couldn't do that. I didn't know this man. I sent him an email. He like, we were friends. We were in the same church small group. That's how we met. Yeah. He was a small group leader, and they're like, you should go to the Cable small group. They're a young married couple. You should go there. And we're like, okay. I meet this guy. We actually didn't get along at first. We had to go and have like a hash out, because he's like, are you a jerk? Basically, it was essentially like, and like, so we didn't get along, and we kind of fumbled through our relationship, and our wives got along, so we were in the room more. Well, then he moves, and it's like, well, that's a friendship that will never connect anymore. And I sent him an email one day, the most God-ordained thing maybe I've ever done, of just like, hey, would you want to just video call? Again, this wasn't pandemic time. This was like 2010, when like the internet would freeze all the time, and we had like, and I was like, I think we could just get to know each other better. And you take Christ seriously. I do. And I just want this brotherhood. And initially what it started out is let's hold each other accountable in like Bible reading or something. And what we quickly decided was, no, let's just be brothers and have a holistic friendship. So there are times, I Skype with Matt today, the day we're recording. It's Wednesdays at my lunch. There are times we talked about our lawns today, because we're old men, and we're talking about lawn seeding and stuff like that. And then we quickly moved into, he is now in ministry, he's a pastor, and he's talking about, hey, can I get a piece of advice on this? Because he just started, and I've got 12 years in this thing, so I'm able to give him some counsel. And then we talked about some of the struggles that we've had in our marriage. 2 weeks ago, I shared with Matt something that I had shared with no other person on this earth, that I felt ashamed to talk about, not because I did something sinful, but because it felt like for a man to have these feelings was less than. And I put them out there of like, do you ever kind of sometimes feel like, and I'm not going to say it on here at all, because there's just no way. And he was like, yeah, man, I'm having the same struggle. And it was like, oh my gosh. We were able to connect over it. And then I was able to actually tell my wife that I really longed to tell her. I was like, Matt gave me the courage to like connect with her over this, but I'd never told anyone that. And I likely won't, just of casual friends. It wouldn't have come up on the golf course.
Of course not.
Like, this was like me bearing my soul. And I felt so, if I can use this term, naked.
Yes.
And just like, I can't believe I'm saying this. I can't believe he knows. I'm such a wimp. I literally said, and I don't mean to be crass, I said, I kind of feel like a wiener saying this, but I feel this way and it's a burden on my heart. And he's like, I do too, man. And he's like, but it doesn't feel very manly, does it? And in that moment, I share that because I feel like in that moment, that was the most manly thing we could have done. Been completely honest, completely vulnerable, and put it out there for one another.
So let me ask you this question. You know, there's people out there listening, possibly men out there listening that maybe didn't have that relationship with their father, don't know how to create that bond because they never had it in their own lives, struggle with not just that brotherhood that we talk about, but maybe even friendships in general. What do you say to those individuals who maybe they're not ready to admit that they want to have that brotherhood relationship, but deep down in their soul, they know they do. Yeah. But what do you say to them as a first step? Where do they start? Because it's not like you just go out and it happens. Yeah. There's a process to it. What do you say to them?
I think you hit the nail on the head. You've got to get around like-minded men that actually are worthy of being brothers. Where do you find that? Find it in the church.
Yeah.
And so, for example, like our church this fall is doing a men's Bible study. Mm-hmm. And I watched an older guy sit across from a younger guy. And when I say older, I mean like 70s to like 20s. And dude, they just hit it off.
Yeah.
These are guys that would have never talked on a Sunday because they just wouldn't have the way they might not sit next to each other. And that's all it takes is you just don't talk. And here they are, they're talking back and forth. Mm-hmm. And they're learning each other's names and they're growing. And then we're studying what it means to be a man in the men's Bible study. Mm-hmm. And there's this connection. So I would say you have to put yourself in environments like that. If you don't, you're not going to find them. You might get lucky at work and you have something like that. But I would argue you got to put yourself in the environment to succeed. Join a board, like, get involved in the church and you'll find it, because more mature people tend to be more involved. And I'm sure this guy, you didn't say, but I'm sure he was serving in the church in multiple ways.
Absolutely.
So like he was one who was living out his faith and showing it. So you were able to, by proxy, see, and it's like because you were involved at the church and went just in attendance, you saw this guy, man, that kind of do. So I would say that's the good first step. We have this guy in our church, Ryan. He started coming as a single man to church. And that is so rare that a single guy, 23, 24, 25, I think he probably started when he was 25, just showed up with his Bible to church. He's a Christian man. He was raised in a good home. He moved. He's working for Crown. He's an engineer. Finding a church, just shows up with his Bible. Now, Ryan is our worship leader. Now, Ryan is getting married. He's engaged. Now, Ryan is an elder quality man and an awesome man of God. And all of that came from him just being consistent and showing up. He's built a whole life here. He never lived here. And he built a whole Christian life here. And is leading worship, and he's doing what God's called him to. He's getting married. But it came because he actually took the chance as a single man that is so rare to show up. He started coming to Sunday school. He was probably the youngest by like 40 years. He wanted to get to know people. He wanted to get to meet them. He started serving in the worship team because he could play guitar. Right. And so that's just like a perfect example. Shout out Ryan if you ever watch this. But it's a perfect example of like you have to show up. That's that first step. What do you agree?
I absolutely agree. I think if you want to be somebody who is healthy, you hang around healthy people who practice nutrition and who practice strength training, whatever it might be. If you want to learn how to drink heavily, you go hang out at the bar. Yeah. I mean, that's the reality, right? Or you go hang out at Boaters Beach. But we hang out with the people that we want to be like. Here's one thing that I've noticed. People who seem to get divorced are surrounded by people who are divorced. Yeah. People who tend to stay married are surrounded by people who tend to stay married. Mm-hmm. And so there is power in those numbers and there's influence in those numbers.
If you have people in your life who go, if I called you tomorrow and I consider you a brother, you and I have a relationship far beyond just football scores and whatever, we could talk. And I called you and I said, Steve, I got to leave my wife, man. I can't do it anymore. And he said, Craig, what's going on? Has there been adultery? No, dude, she just annoys me.
She doesn't know who the starting offensive line is for the Dolphins.
She probably does. That'd be the impressive thing. But we're just not clicking.
Yeah.
Steve, I just want the passion. I want the sizzle. I want, we got young kids. You would not tell me, well, hey man, I got a good divorce attorney.
No.
You would be like, hey, where are you at? I'm going to come over. We're going to
That's exactly
talk about
right.
this.
We would do this face to face.
And we're going to talk about this. And I know that the counsel would then lead, what are you talking about, dude?
Right.
And because the standard that I'm trying to hold myself to, what your standard is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm going to call you to that, not to just be like, and so people have asked me during marriage counseling, they're like, do you recommend a good divorce attorney? I'm like, nope, I'm on team marriage. I'm like, you can figure that out outside of here. I don't hand out because I will never support you walking in that decision. I understand that divorce happens. I understand these things, but I want to always be the guy that's calling you to somehow figure it out. That let God make a miracle out of this. Let's do the phoenix from the ashes of this marriage. Let's figure this out. It might take years of counseling. It might take a period of separation, but we can figure this out. I'm going to be that guy. You need those brothers in your life.
Sure.
Who will call you to that, who will call you on your junk, who will bring you to that thing. And if you don't have that, you're going to surround yourself again by people. But do you ever think that sometimes guys like that because we don't like to be challenged?
I think there's some truth in that. I probably go a little bit deeper than that. I don't know that we don't like it. I think that we're scared to seek it because of that vulnerability thing. What if I get rejected? Mm-hmm. Then I'm less of a man, and now somebody else knows, and they're going to go tell somebody else. Yeah. And so
protection, covering up.
I truly believe that, right? As an individual, though, as you spoke to, I think too that as a mentor or as a friend, as a brother in Christ, I want Craig to be the best version of himself, but I want him to become something that he might not even believe he can become. Mm-hmm. And I want you to see something in you that I see in you. And that is when a true brother comes to you shoulder to shoulder and says, you have not reached your destination. Your potential is not this, it's this. Let's talk about how we reach that. And there's power in that. Mm-hmm. And as a mentor and as somebody who is being mentored, I think we have that give and that take and that brotherhood and that bond. So I struggle with us as men thinking that deep down we don't need that bond, because I think that's something we yearn for. Think of our relationships with our wives. What is the one thing that men, how we connect with our wives? We connect through sex, right? We connect through that intimacy and physical touch. It doesn't necessarily need to be through sexual relations, but it's intimacy. And we love to be told how we are valued, how we are important. Well, we want to be told that by our male friends also, how we are valued, how important we are. What an impact we make in someone else's lives, or what our potential is. But too often, we're afraid to go outside of our own walls or our own comfort zones to seek that. Mm-hmm. But when we do, I think far more times good things are going to happen as opposed to bad things when you're in the right environment.
Yeah. Who you surround yourself with, one of our old youth pastors used to yell at the kids, like, show me your friends, I'll show you your future.
Sure.
But it's true. Show me your brothers or lack thereof. And so, yeah, I think if guys were listening to this, it's like to get involved, to seek it out, to talk, the natural thing that always happens is I have probably 6 or 7 guys a year that'll be like, hey, pastor, like, you've got to be my guy. And I just can't. Like, I can't be that guy for everyone.
Right.
But there have been several that I've been like, hey, I'll meet with you. Let's talk. What's going on? And then I've been able to successfully hand off to an older brother or it's something in the church that I'm like, hey, if you trust me, this guy can be your guy.
Yeah.
Like, this guy can be your brother. You got to trust that I'm handing you off to someone. And some guys won't. They're like, no, I think it really needs to be you. And it's like, no, it really can't. I literally don't have the time or availability to invest in what it needs to be. One, I already have like this guy and like, but like, I just can't do it for everyone. But if you trust me with that, so maybe it's asking your pastor and saying like, hey, is there an older guy in the church, or it doesn't have to be older. Is there a guy in the church that you know of that takes Jesus seriously, that I would be willing to meet with me for coffee once a week? Or would be willing to, I could come over on his back porch on Thursdays at 4:30, from 4:30 to 5:30, and just talk and hear about life. And the men that I know that do that kind of thing are some of the healthiest men that I know.
Let's talk about that. I have a question for you. You talked about your friend that you talk with every Wednesday, Skype together. What is the risk of not having him in your life?
I can say now, because it's been 12 years, it would be catastrophic.
What would that look like?
Matt helped me overcome pornography addiction. So who knows where that goes?
Sure.
And how did he help me? He held me accountable. He held me accountable with the gospel, with the truth, with being there, with non-judging. He used to get accountability reports on my phone. So like what I look like truly held me accountable to that and helped me break free of that. I've run through every purchase, like big purchase, like my homes and stuff. Like we talk about that stuff with each other. Like I literally, like I know his interest rate on his home and he knows mine. I know how much he paid for it and he knows mine. I know his salary. He knows mine. When we buy a new car, we talk about that kind of thing. Why? Because we want to have someone else say, hey, that's folly or that's wisdom. When I'm struggling in my marriage, I don't think I'd be divorced, but I certainly wouldn't be in a healthy spot.
Well, we all struggle in our marriage,
and
right? At times.
He's made me at times go, I remember one time, he's like, you've got a week to talk to Becca or I'm going to call her.
Oh.
It was the gauntlet. And I hated him in that moment, but I knew he was right. Yeah. And he didn't say, I'm going to call her today. Yeah. He said, you've got a week to talk with your wife about this, or I will pick up the phone. He knows I'll do the same.
Yeah.
And so if I didn't have him, other than my wife, he's the most influential earthly relationship. And it's not because he's so much further ahead or so much wiser. He didn't become a pastor till this year. So he was working at a secular university in marketing and communications, and he just took Jesus really seriously. Yeah. Like it didn't have to be this co-pastor relationship. It was just two men of God trying to spur one another on, honest, vulnerable. So if I didn't have him, there's a huge pastoral burnout rate. So he's the guy I call when I want to quit.
I see.
He's the guy I call when I say, hey, what would you think about me hanging gutters or selling cars? You know, because I'm ready to leave this gig, because every job you have the same thing, you know, like everyone's ready to, and he would be the guy that talks me down. The grass isn't always greener, Craig. You're called to this. You feel like, so if I didn't have that, like what I can even say, just to put a bow on it, if you've been impacted by my ministry, by my words, by anything, then you've been impacted by my brother, Matt, without even realizing it, because he has helped me become the man I am. And we pray for many more years of friendship together, decades more. But God has given us 12 and perhaps the most formative times. But I've had someone I could bare my soul to. I've had someone I could talk to. This is a funny story that listeners will laugh at and you'll appreciate. We are so close, and our wives know we're so close, and we've had them down, and our wives know each other well. They would be friends.
I see.
But like very friendly, but like they don't talk every week, but they know we're best friends. And Matt and I were traveling. We went to a conference together. Again, different towns, but we just went to a conference just to spend extended time together. And we were sitting there, and in a healthy way, we were talking about our sex lives, and not in an inappropriate way, but in a vulnerable way.
Sure.
Because if you have a bad sex life, you probably have a bad marriage, and talking about that and struggles and difficulties and victories in that. And his wife calls while we're talking, and he picks it up and he goes, oh, hey, sweetie. And she's like, hey, what are you talking with Craig about? And he goes, oh, our sex life. Dead silent on the phone. And then I hear him say this. I'm not talking about like body parts or anything. Because I know she must have sat back like, excuse me?
Yeah.
But it's that fully honest of like,
Right.
I'm going to talk with my brother about everything because I need a man I can talk to about this. And again, in appropriate ways, our wives trust us to honor the sanctity of our marriage, and what should be remains confidential. There's of course that, but that I can talk about these things with in an appropriate way, because if I'm talking about it on the golf course, it isn't appropriate and it's not helpful. So like I share that as a tongue-in-cheek story, but it's just that reality of like,
it's real.
We have that relationship that can sometimes make our spouses blush and be like, say what now? But if I didn't have that, it's why I'm passionate about male brotherhood and that male bond, because I'm lucky enough to have that with several guys in my life, and it's such a gift.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and such a great example for others to be able to learn from. I think of my own risks if I did not have that outlet, that brotherly connection with a few people, probably realistically, probably 2, maybe 3. And I feel that with you as well. So here's my risk if I don't have that connection. I risk being the judge and jury of my own thoughts without somebody else giving me that alternate perspective. And when you become the judge and jury of your own thoughts, you start to compromise so that your thoughts and connect with your reasoning or your excuses.
Yeah, you've figured out your end goal, and then you've just reverse engineered your reasoning to get there.
That's exactly right. So you become that judge and jury, and I think you risk that different alternative perspective, and you're going to get yourself into a lot of trouble.
So why Matt and I have talked about it, some guys would say that's crazy personal, or I can't believe you do that. Why we've talked about when we've bought cars and bought a house is because we don't want to get swept aside by the flashy thing. And so I want a guy who doesn't have his emotions in it to look at my finances and say, no, this is a wise decision.
Yeah.
You've got this money down and you need a vehicle, and you're not buying a Lamborghini, you're buying a used Dodge minivan, kind of thing. But you're going to finance some of it, which in the Christian community is like, but it's at this interest rate and you can afford. Good. Yeah, no, I think I can see how this is a wise purchase, because then if he comes back and says, I don't know, my guy, I had a friend who bought a car with like 24% interest.
Oh my.
Yeah. And we would both say, don't do that, right?
Right. I would agree with that.
He didn't ask beforehand because he knew what I would say. So when I told him, I said, you absolutely cannot do that.
Right.
And he's like, I already did. And I was like, yeah, you did, because you knew what I'd say. And again, it's his life. That's fine.
Right.
But he didn't ask because he didn't want that feedback.
Right.
So we got to be really careful to not do exactly what you just said of like, can't bring that up because I know what he's going to tell me and I don't want to hear that. When you have that authentic brotherhood, you live in that. Has it been harder for you, or have you had any seasons of like really consistent that, or has it been more, has brotherhood in your life looked more like when things come up, I know this brother's there?
I think that's probably more the reality. I do sometimes go through seasons where I feel disconnected, and that's not anyone else's fault but my own. And that's because I remove myself from things, or I isolate myself in some capacity or for some reason until I go into my cocoon. We go into our shell as men, and we try to figure out our own issues and what is it? What am I thinking? Why am I thinking it? Before we're willing and able to take that forward. Whereas maybe the best approach is to say, hey, Craig, there's something going on. I can't quite pinpoint it. I'm not sure what I'm thinking or why I'm thinking it, but here it is on the table. Can you help me put this puzzle together and figure this out together? But we don't do that often as men, right?
That's why, and so I asked that because I figured very rare does the man have the standing appointment with his friend.
Right.
Like very rare. But again, one encouragement is just to say, and we even had this for a long time, every Friday. Every single Friday for 6 months while I lost 55 pounds and was completely changing my relationship with food. Why did we do that? Because we would not just naturally kind of connect. So we made a point. every single Friday, we're going to check in highs, lows, what's going good, what's going bad.
Right.
And that's why that standing appointment, if I could just give a secret sauce,
Yes.
why did Matt and I work? It's because we've kept a standing appointment. Right. And here's the encouragement to guys. You can actually do this. You think you can't. It might be a little harder if you work on the factory or whatever, because you're in the car, you're not at like a desk with a computer, but you can have a standing appointment because we all eat lunch. And in America, everyone gets a lunch break, and but you can make it work to where, call it 3 out of 4 weeks a month, you can say, hey, I want to make sure we're meeting. Now, I won't Skype with Matt next week because I'll be in Honduras. So we miss a week. We missed last week because it was his anniversary, but we did this week, and we'll do the week after and reconnect. And then we might do 6 in a row because neither of us had anything. It's that when I'm available, I make this a priority. I don't schedule other things in it. So that would be the secret sauce for guys to consider too. And you might even be able to take a friend to a brother if you make it intentional and regular. I
agree with that. I want to share with you a quick story about that very thing, that intentionality, that scheduling the connection following the event, right? So in my world, I provide training, and I create training and develop it, and we carry it out. We have this class that we take for sales training. I'll give that as an example. The challenge with a 1-week session is that when they go back to their branches or go back to their home state, whatever, in their territory, that what was learned wasn't really learned at all. It was taught, but not absorbed to where it was a skill that was developed. So what we created in support of that was a 9-week program of follow-up that they would be able to get on the phone as a team, share experiences out in the field, what worked, what didn't work. And this would happen once a week for 1 hour for 9 weeks. It's this, what I'll call reinforcement, if you will, of what we've learned as a skill practice. And it takes the program, or the learning, let's call it that, the learning, from an event to a continuous improvement, because there's follow-up after follow-up after follow-up. And if you want to be consistent and you want to get better at something, pick anything. The way to do it is to remove it from just being an event. Like, hey, Craig, let's you and I have this one conversation, and then I'm going to leave here and I'll figure out the information and I'll do what I want to do. But if there's accountability and there's brotherhood in weeks to follow, that I know Friday, Craig and I are going to be talking. I need to be doing the thing from Saturday to Thursday. Yeah. So that when Friday comes, I can answer to it. And if we're not doing that, that happens in the business world all the time. It should absolutely happen in our personal lives as well.
Yeah, we schedule what's important to us.
Yeah.
So, all right, brother, this was a good conversation. I hope that our listeners come away from it and that they just take a step of intentionality, that they try and find those brothers in their life, because I saw a statistic literally today, and it shocked me, that 80% of suicides are from men. We have big feelings rolling around in our souls. We don't know how to talk about them. We don't have people to talk about them with. We feel lonely. We've got to stop that. And especially as brothers in Christ, we can come alongside each other. So I appreciate this conversation with you.
Loved having it.
All right.